Hi everyone, Charles from the Food People here. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. It's my great pleasure to welcome CEO and founder of OGGS, Hannah Carter. Hannah joins me today to talk about how OGGS are revolutionising vegan baking and cooking. We'll also be talking about their founding inspiration, the importance of purpose, removing hidden animals from our food chain, as well as the broader plant-based movements and vegan movements, and of course, what is next for OGGS. Welcome, Hannah. Great to have you here with us today.
Hi, Charles. Thanks so much for having me.
Just a little intro into this series at the Food People. We're very clear about why we do what we do. We're champions of change, driven every day by our intent to shift the future of food and drink by harnessing the power of trends. And this In Conversation With series, now in its second series, is all about talking to people, brands, businesses, entrepreneurs across the food and drink spectrum to find out more about why they do what they do and how in their way they're championing change and shifting the future of food and drink. And with that intro to the series, that couldn't be a more fitting introduction to you, Hannah, and OGGS and what you're doing. So let's start, if we can, with an introduction to you and OGGS. Who and what is OGGS?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. So OGGS is on a mission to remove hidden animals from the supply chain. So we believe in a kinder, more sustainable world and believe that there's a way in which we can eat and provide nutrition to humans, but without needing animals. And so we focused on egg, and we have a business that looks at removing hidden animals from the supply chain, hidden eggs from the supply chain, sorry. So what I mean by that is milk powder in a packet of crisps, egg white in gluten-free bread, anywhere where there's animal protein or animal products that aren't there for nutritional content, but that are there simply for structure and function. So OGGS was set up to tackle that with our focus on egg. We have a range of plant-based egg products and a range of plant-based bakery products. So we launched in 2019, just before a series of pandemics, a devastating European war and an economic crisis. So we timed it well.
Can you just bring to life some of the products in the portfolio? What are some of the things that you make and distribute for anyone that isn't aware?
Yeah, of course. So we have a vegan cake range. So our focus is sort of traditional products like Victoria sponge, chocolate cake, lemon drizzle cake, but with a modern twist, i.e. with the eggs and the butter removed. So we have a range of those that you can find in Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Asda, Waitrose, Ocado, etc., across the UK retailers, basically. Yeah. And then we have a plant egg range. So if you think about an egg is three products. It is a whole egg, it is a yolk, and it is a white. Yeah. And we have two products, one which replaces the egg white and the emulsification of a whole egg. Yeah. So to make meringues or sponge cakes or pancakes, for example, and that's our aquafaba. And then we have another product that we called OGGS whole egg, and that basically is there anywhere where you want to eat an egg versus it being an ingredient, or for it to sort of gel and bind. So if you're doing a beef burger, you might use an egg to bind that burger together. You can use our OGGS whole egg or a quiche or a frittata, for example. Yeah. So we have those two products that sort of replace the functional and nutritional needs of an egg.
Okay, brilliant. And you mentioned aquafaba there. What, just for anyone that doesn't know, what is that? And and do you make it from chickpeas, and what do you do with all the chickpeas?
Yeah, so I mean, in essence, aquafaba is the Portuguese for bean water. So it was actually first discovered at the end of the Second World War, when there was a major egg shortage, but it never really took off because at the time we weren't importing legumes. But in essence, aquafaba can be any form of legume water. Right. We chose to use chickpeas. So we extract the relevant mirroring plant proteins of a chickpea and an egg to allow it to foam and to emulsify. Yeah, okay. So, and we extract those from the chickpeas, and we've chosen chickpeas as well because it is the most neutral flavour. Nobody wants their Victoria sponge to taste of kidney beans, even though you use the water from
lovely as they are, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so we extract that and create our aquafaba, which is actually a patented technology here in the UK.
Right, okay. And you make it from chickpeas, so I assume you have a lot of cooked chickpeas.
We do. We do have a lot of cooked chickpeas. Yeah.
What happens to those?
So at the moment they go for biofuel.
Yeah. Okay.
As we're growing as a business, we're able to start to put them back into the supply chain. So when we're large enough and we have a consistent enough supply, the plan is that that goes straight back into the food chain as well. But now it goes into biofuel.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, I had to ask. I thought, imagining all these cooked chickpeas.
Yeah,
Okay.
piling up on the side of the road.
Yeah, exactly. So you started the business in 2018, 19. Rewinding back to that time, what was that kind of founding inspiration, that kind of light bulb moment? What was that, dream, if you like?
Yeah, so I went vegan at the end of 2017. Before that, I'd have come to my house, I'd have cooked you a cracking steak. But have always been obsessed with the environment and trying to do the right thing. And so realized that if I really cared and if I actually meant it, I needed to change what I ate, because one of the largest contributors is animal protein from the environmental perspective.
Yeah.
And then I realized that the dairy industry is the meat industry, so went vegan. And along that journey, noticed how much, as we call, hidden animal there is in the supply chain, things I couldn't eat simply because, Haribo, because there's gelatin in it. It's not there for anything else other than to make it gummy. Or I just had milk powder in a packet of crisps, and this was really frustrating. So I started to think, okay, how can I solve this problem? Because this is so unnecessary. It's sort of like a cancer through our system of all this animal product that we're using that's not really contributing positively. It's simply there for the vanity of our palates, really.
Yeah.
So I have this sort of big vision, how can I fix this? At the same time, thought, there's no way I can be vegan without a blueberry muffin. This is going to be my Achilles heel. How am I going to solve this problem? So I'm actually a terrible baker.
I was just about to ask you if you're a great baker.
No, I'm absolutely awful. I'm a terrible cook, a terrible baker. I know, let's have a food business. But started to bake blueberry muffins at home on my own, and to try and work out how could I use what could replace the egg.
Yeah, okay.
So because there's oil, not butter, in muffins. So discovered aquafaba, started baking with it. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And initially I thought it was more terrible baking. But then actually I realized when I started to do more research, it's inconsistent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I was draining cans of chickpeas for it. And then I suddenly realized, hang on a minute, if I can create this product that's consistent and at scale, I don't need to wait for my dad to start to care about the planet or animals to make change. I can go upstream and start working with major factories and start to remove and reduce the amount of egg that they're using in products like cakes. But we don't need to tell anyone, no one will notice. So that was sort of the inspiration. And a few weeks later, I set up a company and off we went.
And I suppose that leads really nicely into, because I guess this was what you've just said is one of the foundation elements, is how important to you is purpose. What is your purpose and your kind of reason for being, and how does, I guess, that run through your organization?
It's the only reason why we exist. So I could definitely make more money working in management consulting, which is what I used to do.
Yeah.
So it's never been about the cash for Polly or I. It's all been about the mission, and trying to create that sustainable change. So we measure our impact in chicken days off, if those eggs weren't needed, carbon emission reduction, and eggs saved, and ultimately that is an indicator of how successful we're being. If that number keeps growing year on year, then we're being successful. So that's fundamental.
And what is it? And what is your purpose? Is it what's above your head? A kind of more sustainable world, or is it something different?
No, it's a kind of more sustainable world. Our why is that that's what we truly believe in. And actually, if we can provide affordable solutions without compromise, there's an opportunity to create that change. Because as human beings, we don't like change.
No.
None of us like compromise, and I'm one of them. We're all in this together. If you call for an Uber and it takes more than 5 minutes, you're cancelling it, saying this is ridiculous, quick, get another one. Can I get it within 3 minutes, not 5? And so our mission is to find those solutions that can fit in to the uncompromising world that we have created to create that shift in human behavior.
you've talked and meant, you know, it's in the kind of foundation of who you are as a brand and as an individual, removing hidden animals in that from our food chain. Can you just elaborate a bit more on what that means and how much of an issue for you is that? And I guess why just hidden animals and not just animals per se, I guess.
I mean, it's systemic. Fundamentally, there are outdated ways in which we produce our food. Before the introduction of antibiotics into the supply chain, into the food chain, so in case anyone is unaware, every piece of meat that you eat, every egg, every tub of butter, every yogurt is laced with antibiotics. And so, which was a genius idea at the time when we had a lot of food poverty. There was lots of disease within the farming community, and actually with simple antibiotics we could stop so many animals dying and we could feed more people. What's happened though as a result is that we've become so extreme in the way that we farm these animals, and are looking for cheaper mass-produced products, that we haven't stopped to think whether there is a need or not for that animal protein within that product.
Yeah.
And if you think about why animals are so important to us, if we go back, you know, it's that high protein, it's that meat content that's so important. So I personally choose not to eat meat at all. However, we're omnivores. We are designed to eat meat, but not to the extensive way in which we do. And so when you look at, you know, if we just were to look at the legislation around high salt, high fat, high sugar, if we look at those products and the animal products that's in there, that is not there for anything other than function, and then we were to overlay that on the environmental contribution that those animal products are having, it's madness, really. You know, we're focused on, can you fly less? Do you have an electric car? And actually, you know, animal agriculture has a much bigger impact on the environment than transportation. And of course, there's transportation within that, of course, but fundamentally. And so it looks to me like the solution, whilst we're trying to get people to reduce the amount of beef burgers they eat or chicken breasts they eat, actually, if we looked at this on a bigger scale and really looked at the supply chain, if we could reduce the amount of animal products that we have that are so unnecessary, that are simply there for texture or function as opposed to nutrition, we could really solve the problem that we're all trying to tackle of climate change, as well as animal welfare, and provide a nicer environment for these animals that humans insist on eating.
Can you give us some examples of where those exist? Just kind of bring that to life for us a little bit in terms of where some of those, in your words, those kind of unnecessary products are in the food system.
Yeah, sweets are full of gelatin. That's unnecessary. I said milk powder in a packet of crisps. There is beef powder in a whole host of, to add flavorings in. There's beef powder in a packet of crisps. You know, so egg white in gluten-free bread. There's egg white in crab sticks, which is there to make the crab stick bind. You know, none of that is us as an individual saying, I want to have more nutrition, I'm going to eat some Tang-tastics. You know? So actually, and the other thing that's really important about this is, you know, we have a huge farming infrastructure here in the UK, you know, and whether I would like it to not be there or not is irrelevant. This is what we have. And so there are livelihoods and there are individuals within that, you know, and it contributes to the economy. So that needs to be protected at the same time. But the gelatin, the powders, are not made in the UK. They are made in the countries where animal welfare is not at the level it is in the UK. There's deeply intensive barn eggs and terrible practices of chicken farming. They're the places where they produce the egg that produces the egg white powder, that produces the beef powder, not in the UK. So if we were to reduce that unnecessary product, we're not having a negative, we're not taking any money away from within the UK farming system. We're taking it away from those areas where, and no one in the farming community would agree to the extreme conditions within which many of these animals outside of the UK are treated. You know, some supermarkets are importing eggs from Italy, for example, at the moment. That does not comply with the UK animal farming, animal welfare regulations.
Yeah.
So we have regulations for animals that are farmed in the UK, but actually we ignore the regulations of the source of which many of these products are come from, to then be put into as an ingredient into the supply chain.
So it's about challenging upstream supply chain.
Yeah.
And I guess as a brand then, and I appreciate this might be different for you as an individual, are you advocating a vegan food system, or do you think there is a place for well-sourced, perhaps regenerative, truly regenerative animal protein in the food system?
Look, I'm vegan, so I do, you know, I've seen the and understood the extreme suffering that animals go through within our farming system. You know, we choose not to eat our dogs, but we choose to eat the pigs. They're one and the same thing. One just is a bit prettier than the other. So I'm never going to advocate from an animal welfare perspective at all. And ultimately, we have 10 billion people on this planet. The thing that's causing the most issue is the number of people. And we cannot feed the population. So again, forget my views on that, forget my views on the environment. We don't have enough land to sustain the growing population, because, and I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but it'll be roughly right, you need 10 times the amount of land to create the same amount of protein from animals versus meat.
Yeah.
So I mean, all of us, you know, those people that are naysayers today saying this is utterly ridiculous, you know, well, what about your grandchildren? What are you going to leave for them? Or your children, because they're going to live till they're 100. You know, anyone who's below 10 is going to be here in 100 years' time. Yeah. And so in the last 30 years, we've gone from 3 billion to 10 billion, 30 years. So in 30 years' time, it's it's compound growth we're going to see. Mm-hmm. So do I see a place for it? It's not sustainable, and we just physically can't. So we need affordable alternatives.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and clearly our food choices today have an impact on animals, as we've talked about, also the planet, both now and in the future. Is there an intersect with how our food choices, you know, fundamentally impact on humanity into the future as well, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So the World Health Organization has a program called One Health, and it fundamentally looks at, think about a Venn diagram, you know, sustainability, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, and human sustainability. And the reality is, with the growing population, we cannot continue to live in such close proximity to intensively farmed animals. 70% of all the diseases in the last 50 years have come from animals and from animal farming. So it's simply put, and if you go and look at what One Health they're looking at, if we want to maintain our freedom, we have to change what we eat, because SARS was bird flu. The current avian flu, the first child has died of avian flu. It's now transferred into humans. It's now in other mammals. It's in mammals, it's not just in birds. So if we want to continue to have our freedom and not go back into lockdowns and not have restrictions on how we live as human beings, we have to fundamentally create a change. So this isn't really about compromise anymore on, oh, I'd rather eat a beef burger than a plant burger. It's like, okay, would you rather eat a beef burger, a plant, or would you rather have freedom?
Yeah, okay.
To move and operate, right? None of us like that. We all want choice, but this is sort of the extreme, and it sounds extreme, but because we're so huge, and because, you know, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this, we're 12 weeks away from genocide, and we saw what happened when disease spread around the world. We have to make a change and choose different if we want to maintain our freedom of movement and freedom of choice. There's just nothing else that we can do.
And if thinking about change, then whose job is it to drive that change in our food system? Do you think there's obviously various different levels within which we can do that? Is it the role of the consumers to be, you know, more aware and more demanding? Is it about industry being, in your case, being more proactive and being more accountable? And also, is there a role, do you think, for policy change and legislation to enforce that? Yeah, what does that look like for you?
It's a great question, and the answer is we all have to play a role, right? So gone are the days, you know, when I'm 7 trying to convince my family to recycle and they're saying no one else recycles, what impact's that going to have? And then we see the Himalayas for the first time since the 1970s because the world stopped. So from a consumer perspective, if we all make a small contribution, it will help. So as simple as turn over a packet of crisps and choose the one without milk powder in. So that, for a start, will start to drive, if that's the only thing everyone did, that will start to drive change with the producers. But then the producers, so the manufacturers, us, we have a responsibility too. So if we are looking, as we're designing new products and developing new products, actively choosing products with less and less animal protein in, because this doesn't happen overnight, let's be honest. You know, this is a 5-10 year cycle. So if the supermarkets are saying, if they're looking across the infrastructure, so for example, egg in cake, if you take a classic sponge cake, represents 60% of the carbon emissions of that cake is in egg. So if they were to say, we have to reduce the amount of egg that we need, that starts to drive that. And then from a government perspective, because everyone needs to put that pressure on, right? It needs to come from all angles for us to actually, as humans, actually move forward. If the government were to say, like I was talking about earlier, let's focus on the high fat, high sugar, high salt content products and say, any animal product that is not for nutritional content gets taxed. A, would bring in some money to try and solve our crisis that we're in today. But B, what will happen is it will force all of those suppliers to make that shift.
Yeah, okay.
So if you've got consumers making a different change, that helps. If you've got, and bear in mind, we're only talking about where it's not for nutrition. And the other thing is this won't impact the farming community in the UK either. We have to focus on that too. We can't be naive as, if we're trying to make legislation changes. Whilst OGGS thinks globally, our government has to think locally. Yeah. So how can we create that change? So that's, we're all responsible. We all have to make our contribution. And we can't now say my contribution doesn't matter because we've seen the impact of that.
Yeah. So what you would want to see is where there is no nutritional value or content, there would be some level of enforcement or taxation or something around that where it's not adding true nutritional benefit.
Yeah. And if we look at, you know, I went to see a factory the other day and they said they're a bakery and they've just put solar panels on their roof. Brilliant. Absolutely. Of course, put solar on the roof. Great. No problem. But the amount of money that would have cost them versus reducing the egg in their supply chain, and therefore the offset of contribution to the environmental impact is disproportionate. The egg is number 8 when it comes to impact on the environment in all of the food groups. And we know that animal agriculture is one of the biggest contributors. So if we need to focus, because you can't fix everything, what is the thing that we can have the biggest impact on for the least amount of work?
Yeah.
As a country, for us to contribute to globally. And they're the things we need to start looking at. And actually, we've sort of been looking almost in the wrong direction. So packaging, for example, really important. We have to look at that. But from a carbon perspective, that's 8% of the total contribution to someone like Tesco's. So we need to focus on these chunky items. They might not be sexy and they might not be where we want to look and they might be a little bit harder, but within that complex system, if we focus on the areas that means no compromise. So, you know, my poor daddy gets thrown under the bus all the time. Does he care if there's gelatin in his Haribo? He wouldn't even notice. He doesn't even know it's in there. Does he know there's milk powder in a packet of crisps? Absolutely not. He's not even considered it. So we're therefore not asking the consumer to compromise at all. And also, all right, the Haribo might not taste quite as nice, but soon be normalized because you just want some sugar. And then you've forgotten, you know, no one's noticed that Cadbury's has taken loads of cocoa out of their chocolate. And actually it's mainly full of sugar. Everyone's still eating Cadbury's chocolate. And actually the nutrition, the value of that Cadbury's versus 30 years ago, you know, when I used to go around my grandma around the Cadbury's factory, the product's completely different. Nobody's noticed. But the quality of chocolate and cocoa that's in there is mainly sugar now and not cocoa.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
realize pretty quickly too, when it's you know, when it's something like the cakes and the sugars, etc.
I want to ask you a little bit on some of the ways that you and the mechanics you can use to kind of affect change. How important is education and kind of nudging that behavior, do you think, in this overall mix? Because shift takes time. We're all creatures of habit, aren't we?
Yeah, massively so. I mean, fundamentally, to change behavior, we need to have an insight. And what I mean by that is more like a, not like a, yeah, I get it. Okay, understood, but a sort of a deep, oh, I see. Now I get it, right? And without that, you need education to have that moment. You know, before, if you'd have said to me 6 years ago, you're going to be vegan with a vegan food company, and I've said, I don't think so.
No.
Absolutely not. You know, there's no way this is going to happen. And I had an aha moment. And so education is absolutely critical. And in fact, I don't know if you've heard of them before. They're called Tithe, Tythe. And you can go on there, log your full carbon footprint, and you can contribute. You can contribute to protecting trees, you can plant trees, you can contribute to education though too. So educating people on their choices is so important. And in fact, I remember emailing about 5 years ago the Minister for Environment, and she responded back and said, Hannah, it's not our job to tell people what to eat. And I said, no, it's not our job, but it is our job to educate. Yeah. You know, we talked about turn the light bulb off, turn the shower off, now it should be, do you need all of that chicken, or could you have half a breast? Because simply half a breast of chicken versus whole, like those small changes are going to have a massive impact. So education and understanding the implication in a language that people understand too, because when we say often with the team, they'll go, oh, we've saved, you know, 500,000 tons of carbon emissions.
What does that
Great.
mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
You know? What does that really mean? And 500 tons of egg is the equivalent carbon emission of 74,000 flights from London to Madrid.
Yeah, okay. Making it
that
real.
Makes sense. Yeah. Like if you ate, you know, 30 grams of chicken versus 40 grams of chicken, that's the equivalent to half a cup of tea. Okay, I get that, you know. So that's really important too, that we go from the sort of complex science and numbers into what does that mean for my everyday life, so that people can then connect the choice that they're making in real time. And I think that disconnect is quite challenging at the moment, because everyone's talking about saving carbon emissions, etc. But what does that mean for me in my everyday life?
Yeah.
How can I contribute, and how can I measure so I can feel good? I feel like I'm making a positive change.
And how do you do that in your communication? How are you trying to nudge behavior, I suppose, in what you do?
Well, exactly. So when we're speaking to the factories, we'll say, you know, if you reduce this reduction in carbon is X, versus we either do, you know, if it's a bread factory, we'll talk about, you know, number of slices of bread toasted, for example, or loaves of bread toasted. If we're talking about the fat reduction, we'll talk about how many Mars bars we've taken out of the supply chain. So it's just trying to, because people can visualize things that are every day, but it's really difficult to visualize something we don't really understand.
Yeah.
So that's important too.
Clearly, affecting change not only at a consumer behavior level, but also within industry is super important for you, and you've identified that as an opportunity. What is your kind of ask, I suppose, of the food industry as a whole?
It's very, the ask is to not be so short-termism, or short-termist, because we've had a challenging 3 years, and everyone is very focused, especially after the last 12 months, on the cost and the cost to change, etc. And there's an absolute balance on pragmatism of what's possible and what's not, but to continue to have that underlying long term. So any product that's being redeveloped do we need egg powder? You know, do we need beef powder? Could we use a plant-based gelatin?
Yeah.
Because it's the NPD teams, it's the chefs, it's the factories. They're the ones that are putting food in our hands and in our mouths to make a choice from. And so if they've already made more positive choices, it's also then a lot easier for the consumers, you know, because you're choosing between two things that are quite good.
Yeah.
But it's so, don't drop the long term, because it will come up and bite us really quickly.
And thinking about, I mean, many of the people listening will work in different parts of the food industry, and I guess there's two ways of thinking about or embracing what you're saying. Do you see yourselves as, I guess, as a threat to some of those brands or businesses, or are you an enabler for a better future?
When you say a threat to brands or businesses, do you mean eggs?
Yeah, and I guess any you know, anyone that's making cakes or products that have got eggs in them, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, quite frank, an investor asked us this very early doors, and he said, Hannah, if you go out of business because aquafaba has become normalized, and therefore OGGS cakes isn't on the shelf, is that okay? I said, that's absolutely fantastic. So we're not here to build a business, we're here to drive change.
Yeah, okay.
So if us being disruptive enough in the market that creates consumer demand, that educates supermarkets on what's possible, that shows bakeries what's possible, because our bakery range goes head to head with normal cakes.
Yeah.
No one knows they're vegan. We don't really make a fuss about it, you know. Then why would you not have plant-based products on the shelf? Like, seriously, you know, other than just our own human ego of not liking change, like that aside, why would we not? So if we can be irritating enough and annoying enough that people start to look, they start, fantastic. And if there's an implication 10 years time we're not here, so be it.
Yeah, okay. Just a question about the broader plant-based movement in its evolutionary terms, certainly over the, well, definitely over the last sort of 5 years, but, you know, looking back over time, we started talking about flexitarianism some 10 years ago. Where do you see this movement in its kind of evolutionary journey? Where is it, do you think?
It's still in, if you think about the classic diffusion curve, consumer diffusion curve, realistically, it's still with, at best, the early adopters.
Yeah.
You know, I sit in an echo chamber with all the other small businesses, but the reality is, you know, my mum's a primary school secondary school teacher, and she said, I wrote on the board, Hannah, Greta Thunberg, what does that mean to you? And they all looked at me and went, who's Greta Thunberg?
Yeah.
So I think the reality is it's still the minority, but because of social media, it feels bigger than it is. So we're still in the early adopter phase at best. And so we can't stop talking about it to drive that forward. And you can also see as well with the economic crisis that we're in the UK, the commitment that we have naturally as humans, it's got a bit hard. I have to think a bit more. I can't be bothered. Yeah. That's how we are. That's as I said, that's today's society, you know. So we as food businesses have to keep making it more accessible to people, easier for people to think sustainably, to do things sustainably, to keep that moving forward. So because it got unlocked in COVID when people really saw what happened, you know, when suddenly 4 times the amount of turtles on the Mexican beaches are being born because humans aren't there, you know, to now we're in an economic crisis, and now we're hankering down for ourselves, you know, when we come out of that, to make sure that we re-look back out and we don't stop talking about this. Just because it's slowed doesn't mean it won't pick up again. And to lose that commitment to that change.
And clearly vegans, vegan cooks and bakers are at a consumer level a target for, we've talked a little bit about industry, but clearly a target for your brand. But how important do you think non-vegans and those that are kind of animal protein reducing, how important are they to the, I guess, the bigger picture when it comes to affecting change?
Well, they're the most important, because if everyone eat our cake who's vegan, nothing changes, because they don't eat eggs anyway.
Yeah.
We need all the non-vegans. Anyone who's not a vegan, we want to eat our products, because all the vegans are already doing that commitment. So we need everyone else to come on that journey. So they are the primary consumer that we focus on. Vegans, they are so important to us. They've allowed us to grow and get established as a business, you know, and there will always be our and our fan following, but we've got to access everyone else if we want to create this change. So
if you could wave a wand and create the future food system, what does that look like for you?
it's a world without hidden animals.
My last question to you: you've started changing the food system with plant-based egg alternatives and baked goods. What is next for OGGS? Because there's lots of things that need to change and evolve within our food system. What's next for OGGS?
I realise this isn't an exciting answer, but we haven't even scratched the surface with what we're doing now. The UK egg industry is £1.3 billion, and we're not even 0.1% of that. So we are laser focused on egg, and that's what we have to keep focusing on, because there's a huge job to be done. So that's what's next. More, bigger and better.
And by the sounds of things, even greater focus on the food industry and the practical ways within which you can substitute as well, and getting people to think.
Absolutely. So there's a lot, there's so much to be done. As I say, we live in an echo chamber, so it's important to get outside of that.
Hannah, thank you. That concludes this episode of the Food People in Conversation with Hannah. On behalf of us all, the Food People and the In Conversation with audience, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing the OGGS story. It's been a real eye-opener, a pleasure, absolutely, but also a reflection point and something I think for everybody across the industry to take away, and just a moment of reflection and to help us all think about what that future food system could look like and the role that we all play in it. So thank you so much for joining me today.
No worries, thanks for having me.
So do join our TFP community for the details of our latest In Conversation with episodes, as well as the latest free to access food and drink trends foresight. Visit thefoodpeople.co.uk and complete your details at the footer of the page. On behalf of Hannah and myself, thanks for listening to the Food People in Conversation with, and join with us in the trends of today and the foresight of tomorrow to shift the future of food and drink. And as always, I'd like to leave you with one question: how are you shifting the future of food and drink? Thanks for listening.